Hey, what's up everybody? Wes here. Thanks for tuning in for another video. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to do a partial water change on my aquarium. This is a 37 gallon and a few tricks that I've learned along the way. So first things first, the best habit to get into is to test your water with your freshwater master test kit. I've also got this cool little test tube holder. I only do 5 gallons a week, so I'm doing a partial water change. But if I was to test my water and notice an ammonia spike or anything crazy, I would know to do more of a bigger change. What I'm checking for here is pH, ammonia, nitrite, and nitrate levels. And as you can see here, my nitrate levels are a little low. And since I do have a planted aquarium, this lets me know that once I do my 5 gallon change, I can just reach here for my fertilizer and give it a little bit of a top up at the end. Now to get started, I always throw down a towel here on the table and just to kind of have a spot for spills or anything like that. Get everything pulled off the top of the tank. I've got my fluval light here. I'll turn that off and set it aside. And I've also got these cool little hangers here for my pothos. This is a neon. I've also got a golden in the tank. It's a really cool little kit here. I've modified them slightly, but I'll put a link in the description for these. I got them off Amazon, but it's a really awesome option just for hanging plants in your tank. That way they don't sink too low. Next up, I'll remove the top, and you can see here, this one's pretty heavily customized for lights and filters, different cutouts that I've made. And I've also got Hillstream loaches, so I want to get this process done pretty quickly so they don't have an opportunity to crawl out. Grab your little hand towel. That's something that's going to be really important as we move along, and we'll move on to the next step, which is going to be getting the inside of the glass clean. Oftentimes we'll use this mag flow or just a simple sponge. The mag floats work really well. It's just a magnet. You can get these for glass or acrylic. This is the glass version, and you just screw it around the tank and just knock off any of the film. And if you pull this thing away from the tank, it just floats to the top for easy retrieval. Now a sponge does the same job, but this will keep you from getting your arms wet, or you could just use the sponge on a stick. Next up, I've got this pipette here. I believe this is a fluval, but I'll kind of just go over here to the plants and just give everything a squirt, just to make sure we blow off any of the debris that might be hanging out on that or on the rocks. We're generally just kind of getting the whole tank stirred up here. Just that way everything can be floating around to either get picked up by the filter or to settle on the bottom. So while we're letting that settle out and letting the filter pick it up, we're going to move into the bathroom with our clean bucket and then an extra gallon of water. I like to go ahead and fill this one up also just as top-ups for later. And what we're going to use here is Seachem Prime. This is our dechlorinator to make sure that the water is safe. So we'll go ahead and apply that to the bucket and the gallon at a rate of 2 to 3 drops per gallon is what I've been doing here. And then I actually just fill everything up with a tub, and I've got a meat thermometer where I can actually check the temperature of the water coming in and then adjust it as needed just to make sure that we're not too far off from the actual tank's temperature. So I don't want to put anything in that's way too hot or way too cold. But we'll leave this sitting, and then we'll go ahead and get ready for our next step, which is to grab the dirty bucket. I just leave it dirty, that way I know which one is which, and then move back in here to the tank. If you've got a heater, make sure that that's turned off because we don't want to crack any of these heaters once we start to drain the water out. And for the rest of these steps, we're going to need to have clean hands, so let's go ahead and get washed up and get ready for the actual water change. So with the filter mechanism off, I like to go ahead and get some paper towels. I found out here that these 4 sheets work well for just getting the surface film off of the tank. So I'm just going to float it on top here, being careful not to grab any of the small fish, and just kind of give it a quick skim just to make sure that there's no surface film, oils or anything like that I want to go ahead and remove. Now for the tube here, this is just roughly a 6-foot section of Python tubing. I don't use the attachment at the end. I'd really just use the tube. It works really well, and I squeeze it if I need to slow down the flow. But I'll pull my bench out here, get my dirty bucket ready, and then before you start siphoning water, you want to make sure that your heater and your filter are off, depending on how much you're going to take off. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off my air pump. It's on a timer anyway. It's not going to hurt it if it goes, but I want to turn off my heater. I've got it marked as a UV light just in case I take out too much water. I don't want to damage that in any kind of way. Next, we'll start up our siphon tube with just a little bit of suction and just go around the tank real carefully and just get all of the major debris that's on the bottom. We're not going to take out all of the 5 gallons. I'm just going to take out enough water to kind of get the major cleaning done and to also have some water in my bucket to clean out the filter. We'll do that after we give the inside glass one more final clean. So this is where I reach in for that little sponge. Again, you can use the mag float for this, or you could use the sponge on a stick, but just carefully make sure all of your inside glass is clean and give it a squeeze out here. Make sure you bring your trusty help here for your aquarium cleaning day. This is Chewy. But next up, we're going to take this little bit of water in our bucket and get the filter cleaned out. So we'll need to switch it off here and make sure that there's no power going to it. And then we'll just go ahead and pop the top here. This is a Tidal 55. These things are super easy to clean. I've got a little bit of added filter media here. I believe this came from Marineland. It comes in a big pack and you can just cut them to size. I've got another piece here just ready to throw in. So I don't bother cleaning that out. I just swap this out every time I clean and just keep the beneficial bacteria in the bag, but I'll toss this one in the trash. So next up, we'll take the bucket here and just slide it out. This has got our coarse filter sponge and then the bag of beneficial bacteria. And then we'll move it right over here into our dirty water. Again, this is water that we just pulled out of the tank. And then what I normally do, I only do this usually every couple of weeks, but I'll go ahead and take the beneficial bacteria bag out and just kind of give it a swish out in the water just to make sure that any of the larger chunks fall out. Sometimes if it's bad enough, I may pull out the coarse sponge filter and do the same, but right now it's in really good shape, so we'll just leave it like it is. We'll get the bacteria back into the canister here, and then we'll just pop it back in. We want to make sure we do this as quick as possible. I like to get some water flowing back on the bacteria and not leave them hanging. So we'll just put in our new filter pad and then we'll get everything switched back on. And another reason I do it this way is because once you've cleaned your filter and kind of disturbed it, it's likely that it's going to spit out some debris into the tank. And since we're not done with all of our siphoning, that's going to be fine. This new filter will catch a lot of it, but anything that makes its way into the tank, we'll just finish getting out in the siphoning process as we move forward. And you can also take your pipette here and just reach in and fish out any of the bigger items that you see floating around that maybe aren't going to settle yet. That's something you can also do on a day that you're not cleaning. So here's the tank after I've removed the rest of the water. Again, this is a 5-gallon change, and I've got my 5 gallons of clean water here. So now we're ready to go ahead and get it moved back in. I've got a new item plugged in here to my power strip, and it's just a simple top fin pump. This actually came with a tank at one point, but it's just a little, it was a filter pump, but I'm just using it to pump the water in. It's got an outlet and an inlet here, and I just took some tubing to connect it. It's just some stuff I got from Ace Hardware. This little L-shaped bracket came with it, and then this little filter tip actually came off of a sponge filter, and you'll see why I use this here in just a second. So I'll just drop this down into the bucket and then get ready to power it on once we've hung it over the tank. Now that we're ready to go, just give it some power, and then the pump's going to do all the work, move the water from the bucket into the tank, and it's also going to create some nice aeration. This just keeps me from having to lift up a 5-gallon bucket and dump it into the tank, and it kind of makes this process a little bit more smooth. And just monitor your water levels. Once you get everything up high enough for your heater and your filter, just go ahead and switch those back on because we'd like to get those running as quick as possible. I'll switch the air pump on because it's ready to go anytime. Now our filter is at the right level, so I'm going to go ahead and get that on so the beneficial bacteria can get water moving across it as quick as possible. And now that the heater is above the minimum line, I'll click that back on. That way it can be getting the water to the proper temperature. Even though the water in my bucket's pretty close, you just want to get that on as quickly as you can. And then once we're done here, we'll just shut everything down, and I'll pour the last little bit from the bucket straight into the tank. Now with your 1 gallon that you filled up earlier, you can use this for top-ups. So I needed just a little bit more extra water, so I'm just going to bust that out and get it topped up. And anything that you don't use, just put it back up under your tank and use it for later. I'll use this throughout the week if the filter gets a little noisy. After that, we'll just get everything put back into place. We're going to get our plants in, our lights on. And then you can see here we've got a nice clean tank. We still have just a couple of more steps here. If you remembered earlier, our nitrate levels were a little bit low. So we are going to doctor that up by adding a little bit of this Easy Green by Aquarium Co-op. There's tons of different brands here. I'm at about 3 milliliters, which is a little bit less than what it probably recommends for this size tank, but I just don't want to overdo it on the fertilizer. If I see the plants start struggling, then I would add a little bit more or look more into it. I also use their root tabs. They seem to work really well. And then our last step here is just to use a little microfiber rag and just buff off any of the stuff here, any of the water drips that might have happened during cleaning, and then we're good to go. But really, that's it. That's my cleaning process in a nutshell. I do this once a week. I try to do it every Friday or every Saturday. I'll just keep the 5 gallons coming out. So you'll need to look at your tank and take the size into account and see how much you need to be taking out. Maybe 5 gallons isn't going to work for you. You might need to do a little bit more. Maybe your tank's smaller. You can get away with doing a little bit less. But definitely find a maintenance schedule that works for you. Something that you can kind of keep on as doing as a steady basis. And to do all these things, really test your water, keep your filter clean, make sure you're siphoning up any of the uneaten food, poop off the bottom of the tank. Don't overstock your tank. Don't really just be adding fertilizer without testing it. I could just add fertilizer weekly and assume that's what I should do, but if my nitrate levels are too high, that's not a good idea. So just use some common sense with your aquarium. But if you have any questions or concerns or comments, definitely leave those below. I'll do my best to get back to everybody. But in the meanwhile, I really appreciate you tuning in, and I hope to see you on the next video. All right, peace.